Well lads, sorry, you're after catching me in the middle of playing the Stanley Parable. See, in just a few minutes, it'll finally have been 10 years since I last played the game. I'm so close to 100%ing it. This achievement is all that I need. And you know, to spend the time for the last 10 years while I've been waiting for this achievement to unlock, I've been playing more games that actually didn't want me to play them, and I've learned a lot of skills in that time. Good time management wasn't part of it.
You know, a pretty big part of games is time. I've already covered that topic, but that was for a game mechanic, not a general concept. Games take time. It's why no matter how beloved or niche your favorite JRPG is, those things being 80 plus hours of content to get through means some people just cannot play them. They simply don't have the time. It's why multiplayer games, gacha games, and mobile gaming as a whole have such massive markets. The time investment required is far lower, so more people can afford to play them. Once you pick up that 9 to 5, finding the time to take on God is suddenly a lot harder. And obviously every single game requires your time. Everything in life requires your time. But what if we bent those rules just a little bit? Not quite what I meant. Games that don't want you to play them. What kind of backwards contradiction just came out of my mouth?
Ma'am!
Every game wants you to play it. That's the whole point of games. What I'm referring to is one of two things. One, games that encourage the player to go AFK, as in some kind of reward is achieved regardless of the player's presence. And two, games that encourage a lack of interactivity, as while the player is still present and playing, there's a certain aspect that either requires or suggests that they don't need to do something. Now there are good and bad ways to go about these, or to put it maybe a little bit more academically, intentional and unintentional examples that I've come across, with both having the potential to be fun concepts for a game, or outright damaging it. So we may as well start with one of the funniest. The Stanley Parable broom closet ending. Walk into the broom closet and stay in there while the voice rips you to shreds for 5 minutes straight. You don't need to do anything once you're in there. You can just wait around and it's hilarious. It's an easy example of a very intentional decision to reward the player for going AFK, or in this case just not leaving the tiny room with nothing in it. And of course there's the go outside and super go outside achievements, not wanting you to play the game for 5 and 10 years respectively. I mean, by definition the two of those count. But let's move on to something a little more traditional as far as games go. Gacha game auto battles. Now, I'm only going to be showing footage of them in Honkai and Persona 5X because where are the extra 50 gigabytes contained? Gallagher's chest and Merope's hips? Now, I've never been a massive fan of gacha games, but knowing that a lot of them have these auto battle features, as an outsider looking in, it always confused me. On the one hand, they're nice to have. They make the necessary grind of a lot of these games far more bearable, since you can just set them to it themselves and do something more fun like playing Pokémon VGC 2014. It effectively removes the time sink that would otherwise be present, and it's a very intentional addition in that regard. But I'm not sure if I think they're a good thing to have. I mean, by adding in an auto battle mode so that players don't need to spend as much time playing the game, doesn't that kind of prove that there are issues within the game? It's awkward. On the one hand, they're a very nice quality of life feature to help out players, but on the other, they could be entirely avoided if you didn't make the grind such a necessary part of the game. I mean, look no further than Limbus Company. Genuinely one of the kindest gachas that I've ever played when it comes to respecting your time and not having an insane grind that demands your money if you want to avoid it. So these auto battle features in gachas, while not something that I would call bad, I'd certainly label them as part of a problem. They're methods to have the players play the games less because the company or devs or even players themselves realize that they need to play too much. I mean, how do you get to that point? So gacha auto battles and whatever the hell is going on in the Stanley Parable are two examples of games having moments within them where they don't want the players to play. But what about games that dedicate themselves to having an entire part of their gameplay loop that involve you doing nothing? This is where auto chess comes in. Now, similar to gacha games, I'm only going to be looking at TFT, because while there are many differences across the genre, the only other one I have installed is Marvel Rivals and its Ultron game mode, but that comes with its own set of issues. Every auto chess consists of two sections to its gameplay, the game and the watch. You'll spend half of a round building up your pieces, gathering items and selecting game-specific augments, and when it comes to battle, you just have to sit back and watch. There's been multiple times where I have set up my board quickly and ran off to the bathroom since I was no longer needed. And it's a very fun gameplay loop that I want to try in more different kinds of genres. You can't entirely go AFK, not at all, but the main gameplay sits in team building, positioning your pieces well to protect your carry, and placing the right items on the right targets while keeping in mind what enemies are running. In a sense, it's quite similar to a tower defense game like Bloons. You have no direct influence on what enemies your pieces target in either game, the majority of the time at least. So despite half the gameplay loop not involving any immediate input from you, you still need to be present and micromanage your board to the best of your ability. Whether it's through achieving the exact class buffs you want on TFT, or perfectly positioning your monkeys and Bloons to combo the incoming enemies, with the reward that the player can achieve being the confidence that they don't need to change anything at the present moment. Or in other words, the reward is that you interact less because you've built your team so well. It's strange to say, but it works well. Rewarding the player by making them play less sounds stupid, but when you build your game around that idea, creating it with the goal of skilled players becoming so powerful that they can just sit back and watch as their creation mows down everything in its path, you've made one of the most fun possible gameplay loops. And it's not just these top-down deck builder, team builder type games that can have this aim either. A lot of roguelikes follow it as well. In Vampire Survivor, you only control your movement. Damaging enemies is always done automatically, with the general goal being to get to a state where you're so powerful that you can just let your build do all the work and not even worry about your positioning. Even in Risk of Rain 2, the same idea can apply depending on the character and build. I mean, everyone who's played Engineer has gotten to a point where they have a stack of 10 mushrooms and can just stand still and watch as their turret tears enemies to pieces while being near impossible to take down. And speaking of turrets, let's move from the AFK section to the second one, games that encourage a lack of interactivity. The reasoning I bring this up with turrets in mind is because turrets are naturally self-sufficient. The point of them is to be placed down to hold an area while the player is elsewhere, but this is a thin tightrope, especially in a multiplayer scenario. So I'll go through a few different examples, starting with So Marvel Rivals, while I've had more than my fair share of criticisms, there is one thing I have to praise, and why does it have to be the worst man Marvel ever made? Namor in Rivals is an incredible turret builder in his concept, and it's all because of his squids. Namor can have up to 2 turrets out at once and has 2 charges of them, with a 12-second cooldown and 8-second duration. This gives him a choice to make at all times in-game, to either throw out both turrets at once for maximum damage output, but with more downtime if they're destroyed, or to space them out one at a time to keep your overall damage higher by having less downtime and always having another charge ready. The rest of his kit meshes with this quite well. A perfectly fine primary fire that's fun to hit, a secondary fire which directs his turrets to whatever target it hits, and his shift places him in the air, letting him reposition slightly and more notably allowing him to stall to get his turrets back. The reason I have such high praise is that this avoids the big issues that turrets can have. They give players less to do. If a turret is too powerful, it takes away from the amount of interaction the player needs. Namor avoids this with several methods. First, his need to constantly manage turret uptime means he can't just place them down and forget about them. They expire, so he constantly has to choose locations for turrets during a fight. And second, his turret's damage by itself, while not negligible at all, it can't carry him. Namor needs to hit both his regular shots and more importantly his secondary fire to actually contribute enough damage alongside these turrets. The lack of interactivity turrets which are too powerful create is almost never intentional, and usually leads to gameplay that the majority find boring. So I have to praise NetEase for creating a turret builder that keeps players engaged. In concept. In practice, Namor doesn't quite hold up to this, with one big reason being one of the most problematic aspects of Rivals, team-ups. Both iterations of Namor's team-up have given him a second turret type for 3 in total, completely warping his previously sound gameplay loop. He no longer needs to make a choice of setting up both turrets or balancing them out, as he'll nearly always have 2 active with 1 in reserve. Now this team-up turret is also stronger, not to the point of letting Namor go AFK or anything of that sort, but it does take away from how much he needs to do without it, and in other words, it creates an ever so slight lack of interactivity within his kit. Yes, the Namor player still needs to hit their shots, but the gameplay loop overall demands less from this player. It also doesn't help that realistically, the most straightforward and common way that players actually play Namor is just by sitting in their backline to place turrets up as anti-dive tools. A playstyle that revolves around always playing second always has less interactivity, but that's separate from his turrets. To swap games for a moment, Overwatch used to have it even worse in its early days with Torbjorn. Before his rework, Torb was quite similar to Engineer TF2. needing to build up his turret to level 2 and his ultimate building it up to the raid boss of level 3. I'm sure we've all seen those 2016 clips of a Tor being dead and his turret letting him get play of the game. His rework fixed this though. His turret became quite similar to Namor in the just throw it out sense, alongside losing a bit of damage to it, and the rest of his kit followed suit in this more aggressive nature. His attack speed was increased, with bullets also directing his turret to their targets, which I need to point out, similar to Namor's secondary fire, is a really smart decision to make. Letting players have some amount of control over their turrets instead of making them fully autonomous is the perfect way to make sure the player doesn't just throw down their turret and forget about it all the time. The idea of his ultimate was moved to an ability, but removing the level 3 turret and allowing him higher moments of impact overall. And his ultimate was replaced and made to mirror his previous ultimate style of holding space, though to a lesser degree, as it was also influenced by the strongest composition at that moment in GOATS, but that full explanation is in a different video. Personally, I'd consider this rework to be a decent success. While it had its flaws, it removed Torb's big problem of being useless without his turret and then just alright with it, and let him work better on both offense and defense, effectively removing the lack of interactivity you'd see within his gameplay. And then perks happened. While it has been nerfed to be less oppressive when perks released, Torb could regain his level 3 turret by using Overload, completely breaking it. At the press of just one ability, Turret would borderline pick up any and all slack that Torbjorn would have been leaving down, and if he wasn't, you can imagine the rest. Now, while this case doesn't exactly fall into either of the two categories I've been talking about in higher play, once you look down at the players who have a 9 to 5, the issues start to appear, with one button enabling the player to just sit back. Now, in fairness, it's not quite as egregious as I'm describing, but it's notable. If the turret was already running away with wins in higher ranked games, you can imagine the interactions it would have against players who have actual lives. And to round out this multiplayer shooter segment with one last example, we may as well look at the original builder, Engineer TF2. Unlike the previous two mentions, Engineer has multiple buildings and can have up to 4 placed, meaning he always has more to be doing. Like I already mentioned, he has to level his turret up to 3 if he wants it at its strongest, so he can't just leave it on the intelligence or control point and move on. But not only does he need to make other buildings to support his team, he also has to protect them as they become high priority targets. So through this, he avoids the issue of turrets being too powerful to the point where they remove the need for Engie to be present, as he always has to be present to protect them. But he has another option for those interested in it with the Wrangler, allowing him to completely control his turret, once again removing any potential issue of the turret doing all the work for you. Honestly, a near perfect builder character. But before I wrap up this multiplayer segment entirely, I have one final example still within the shooter genre that I would like to cover in snipers. Now, unlike the turret example, this won't be looked at through the angle of playing as them, but rather against. And the reason I bring this up in this topic of all things is because of what people say the most common counterplay to snipers is, just don't peek them. I'm sure my reasoning is apparent, but in case it isn't, I'll elaborate. What is this best play to make if not a direct example of a lack of interactivity, effectively the game not wanting you to play it? A sniper is holding down a certain angle, meaning you should not enter that area anymore, effectively creating a section of the game which you should not play. The same situation is even in League with Singed, but to a lesser extent in terms of its frequency. The most common counterplay and another famous saying in League in regards to Singed is to never follow him, meaning that the best way to play into a Singed is not to. Now, in fairness, unlike the sniper example, it's not quite as rigid with Singed as he can never threaten to one-shot you, but counterplay which just encourages a lack of gameplay or interactivity, as I've been saying, isn't the most fun possible design as far as I'm concerned at least. But both of these examples are more than just a stretch of my own definitions, so definitely take these with a good few cranks of salt, lads. But that's enough multiplayer games. Let's return to single player with a genre that perfectly fits this topic, idle games. Let's take Civ Idle for example, entirely because I've been enjoying it more than any other idle game I've ever played, but it really goes across the whole genre in different ways. The whole point of idle games is that you're supposed to leave at any point. They don't want your full attention, it's in the name, meaning they perfectly slot into our AFK section. Within Civ Idle, there's a lot of waiting, whether it's for constructing buildings, upgrading them, or just gaining resources, giving you plenty of time to do something else, like write a script about games that don't want you to play them. You can tab in and out to advance your sciences and unlock new buildings and resources to give you more resource-specific tiles and reasons to build out your empire, and with resource generation having plenty of storage while everything takes minutes to hours to complete, it's very hands-off. You can leave it alone for hours at a time to come back, upgrade some of your buildings, maybe create some new ones, advance your sciences, maybe pick a new great person, and repeat. It's really simple, but really fun when your brain is like mine and either cannot focus to save its life, or can just suddenly do all the work you needed in just a few hours. So it acting as a non-committal source of entertainment while I work has been really fun. I never quite got idle games before I gave this one a try, and it's just a lovely little game to keep you occupied while doing more menial tasks. And then there's idle games that aren't games. This little guy gains new hats and colors the more I type. It's kind of funny, he's just hanging out. The entire purpose of idle games is to just be left there, effectively not be played, because they'll only need you to tap in once every few minutes to maybe only once an hour. A perfect example of a game that doesn't really want you to play it. I have 2 more sections left, one for each category, so I'm going to save best for last and cover the final section of games that encourage a lack of interactivity, but please know that I'm stretching my own definitions a little bit more here again. Starting with Sonic. The first thing that may come into your head is the mini cutscenes that play during levels where you lose control of Sonic as he hits some sequence of springs or maybe goes through a loop-de-loop. And while these technically count as no input is needed from the player, these aren't what I'm talking about because they're so short in their duration, and in a slightly similar way to TFT and Auto Chess as a whole, they're still fun to watch. Until the entire level is filled with them, but that's a different issue. What I'm specifically referring to is just another excuse to dog on Sonic Forces. As someone who grew up with Sonic Colors and has been enjoying playing Unleashed Recompiled recently, I have to say I am a fan of the boost formula. Until I'm not. Plenty of stages within Forces can be beaten through just holding down boost and maybe the occasional jump. And while this technically wouldn't be a game that doesn't want you to play it, would you consider being able to beat the game by holding down just one button playing it? And speaking of holding down one button, Pokémon. Over the last few years, I've been getting further and further into competitive Pokémon to the point where it has fully revitalized my love for the franchise, especially with the extreme depth on offer. Picking the right moves, items, and abilities when building your team is ridiculously engaging and is honestly a whole other game before the actual battle happens. But this entire system can't be engaged with until after you finish the game, at the very least if you want to start building your own viable teams to bring to real events. And even in Scarlet and Violet, which has made this stuff more accessible than ever before, with easy nature, EV, and IV training items, alongside battle items that can all be purchased with regular money in-game, rather than the battle tower points from previous games. But why do I bring all this up? Because this fun depth can't be accessed till pretty much the post-game, like I already just said. And it also means that enemy trainers never have EV or IV trained Pokemon, meaning that in battles, players can just start spamming A on their starter's first move and win. This is a lack of interactivity if I have ever seen it. And just for the uninitiated, EVs and IVs are just numbers that affect your stats, the same as nature's. But your level 40 starter with scattered EVs from wild Pokemon always has more stats than level 40 NPC Pokemon, which only have their base stats and level increases to go off of. Naturally, this is also Pokemon, it's the kids game, so adding this level of difficulty to ask more of players who can read would destroy little Timmy, but also take a look at the trainer battles in the Scarlet and Violet DLC. These guys are EV and IV trained. They have competitive level teams, which actually make the DLC campaign really fun since you needed to do more than just spam A through battles, which is nearly the perfect example of a lack of interactivity. You need to use stance moves, you need to use boosting moves, make use of certain abilities like Prankster to set up light screen and reflect before you can even take damage. You need to actually think and engage with the battle system, so it's clearly possible for Game Freak to make a difficult Pokemon game, so maybe ZA will be the light at the end of the tunnel. Either way, those last two were fringe cases that I wanted to mention, but I'm bending my own rules to include them here. However, I don't need to do that at all for this next section, which I'm going to call the Factory Builder. Now, I'm going to start this off with a game that isn't supposed to fit into this at all, with Minecraft. While Minecraft obviously wants you to play it, players don't a lot of the time. And that is where AFK farms come into play. Whether they're fully automated farms that give you all the food you could ever need, Mob XP farms to accelerate the enchanting process, or iron farms to allow you to completely skip out on mining and smelting the resource, players, including myself, love creating methods to make us play the game less. But this isn't a bad thing. Even though, yes, you're no longer running through your farm to harvest melons and pumpkins, that's the point. Creating these AFK farms you don't need to be present to actually gain resources from passively, is the reward. Basically, not needing to play that aspect of the game is your reward. It frees up your time to perform other tasks, whatever they may be, from exploration to more farm building. While there could be moments where you simply have to sit by the farm and wait till you have enough resources of your desired output, but an important thing that I haven't mentioned is that even in the situation where you basically don't need to be present to actually play the game in Minecraft, this was your choice. The game isn't designed to encourage these sorts of automation, it's the choice of the player. In my case, I like creating these farms to have an abundance of whatever resource I want, typically the first one being food, so that I never have to worry about it running low, meaning I can focus more on what I really enjoy in Minecraft, which is just creating random redstone contraptions. The next two games are the complete opposite of the Minecraft example, where both are made with the purpose of getting the player to the point where they are no longer playing a certain aspect of the game. But one of these is just a shoo-in, so I can talk about a game that I adore. Play Opus Magnum. Opus Magnum doesn't quite count for this video as a whole because of its level-based progression, but the end goal is to make an efficient machine that you can just leave on. After building your chemical instrument and giving it the correct instructions, you need to sit back and watch as it completes enough cycles. But this moment of not playing and watching is where you can actually observe for ways to make your machine more efficient, and the bar graph that the game shows you displaying how other players performed in that level in regards to the amount of cycles, gold spent, and the space that machine took up act as little incentives to try do better. But realistically, this doesn't work as a part of this discussion, but when will I ever have the excuse to talk about Opus Magnum again? You've seen the type of games I normally frequent. And for the final contender of games that don't actually want you to play them, it's gotta be Factorio. I started playing Factorio just for research for this, and honestly I have to question why people do drugs when they can just play this game instead. The entire point of Factorio is to slowly build up your factory so you can escape from the planet you're crash landed on. You want to automate everything from mining, smelting, and crafting so that you can always move on to the next thing, which often requires the vast increase in resources that automation provides. But even with this, there will be moments where you don't have much to do. Take research. Whether in the tutorial or not, there can be moments where it just feels like there's nothing to do but wait for the research to complete. Now you could rework your lab positions and add more, alongside increasing the output of your science packs to help speed up the process, but after that, you will more than likely be waiting, especially if you're in need of crucial early game resources like steel. There is always this itching feeling in the back of your mind that you can do more though, but at times it may not be possible. Like in the case mentioned above where you're just in dire need of one resource before you can move on, at the very least when you're new to the game like I am, it really feels like it. To use a different example, I saw this pile of uranium a little distance away from my main base, too long to just set up a conveyor belt, meaning I was going to need a train. Easy. But to get one, not only did I need to research steel, I needed to research engines and railway lines. And with my inexperience, I didn't see much else to do in the meantime other than set up the initial mine for the uranium, as without better power lines, which I also needed to research, connecting my electricity down to the mine would have required an incredibly long line of wooden poles, quite the waste of resources. And then in the process of moving down to the uranium to set up my mine, I was met with a message telling me that I needed to research how to mine uranium, leaving me completely lost as for what I should do next, since all my plans were getting shut down by the need for research. I definitely chalk this example up as more of a me issue regardless, since I'm still in the process of figuring this game out. So yes, there are moments in Factorio where you simply aren't needed for something and just need to wait for your own automated machines to complete their jobs. But that's not a flaw, whether or not it's just my own fault as a new player. In these factory sim type games, like I already mentioned in the Minecraft AFK farms, getting to the point where you aren't needed for one task frees you up for another. It's the entire point of this genre. Finish one task so that you're no longer needed for it, and so that it can be a stepping stone for your next one and repeat. It's a beautiful and terrifyingly addictive gameplay loop, even if there are moments in it where I, at the very least, felt like I had no actions I can immediately take. So I just sit there waiting for my machines to complete whatever I'm waiting on while I play Pokémon Showdown.
Obviously, every game wants you to play it, but there are moments, whether intended or not, where you can take a step back. And that moment is finally about to come to an end for me. It's been 10 years since I last played the Stanley Parable. I've been wanting to replay it over the last 10 years so badly. I gotta get into it right away.
Where's the achievement?
Ah, well lads. What happened to him? Oh, him? He opened the Stanley Parable 10 seconds too early.